oversee our work to create equitable and accessible opportunities to increase the number of people with lived disability experiences throughout the overall storytelling process. These initiatives, we hope, will increase diverse and authentic representation of disabled people on screen, leading to systemic change in how society views and values people with disabilities. Myself, I'm an individual with an acquired non-apparent disability called reflex sympathetic dystrophy. And I had, as well as some of my colleagues, the privilege of consulting on numerous projects, including this one that we just got to see today. 1 in 5 people in the US have a disability. And so the lack of representation, which is less than 1% in children's television, means that millions of children are unable to see themselves in media today. But as we're seeing with Firebuds, which has introduced several disabled characters, it ensures that disabled children and adults alike, which are often overlooked, are represented. So joining me today, as I'm seeing in the comments, everyone's kind of here to see our guests today. We have Emmy-Award winning writer and producer Craig Gerber, the creator and executive producer of Firebuds, as well as writer Jeremy Shipp and his son Henry, who inspired this episode. Henry was born with a cleft lip and palate, and he also voices Castor in this episode. So Craig, I'm going to start with you. As the executive producer, you've made the decision to really have a truly inclusive show in so many ways. As we talked about in October, this world of Gearbox Grove and nearby Metropolis includes a recurring character, Jazzy, a young Black girl who uses a wheelchair. And in this episode, we meet Castor, who's undergoing a surgery for his cleft lip and palate. Why is it so important that we see a diverse representation of so many different types of disabilities on Firebuds?
Well, over the course of my previous shows, I've seen firsthand how much representation matters to young children, especially on Elena of Avalor, which featured Disney's first Latina princess and an extremely diverse cast. You know, it's really important for children to see themselves represented on screen in a positive way. It bolsters their self-confidence. It gives them a sense of being seen for who they are. And the disabled community is a group that I felt has been underrepresented in the past. So we wanted to address that in Firebuds, first by introducing a recurring character, Jazzy, whose roommate is a wheelchair car, and she has spina bifida. But she recurs in the show. She's the sister of a main character. There are several episodes that are centered around Jazzy in particular. So that was one way that we wanted to include more diversity, especially for the disabled community. Another way was individual episodes. And in the case of this one that we just watched, Cleft Hood, you know, our show involves medical first responders. So we thought there was a great opportunity to do a story about someone who has medical issues that required hospital stays, so that kids watching at home with similar challenges could see themselves reflected on screen. And get a sense of sort of empathy from that. But the specific credit for this storyline goes to Jeremy. It was his idea.
Excellent. So let's head over to Jeremy and would love to learn more about how this idea came about.
So obviously it was inspired by my son. He's very inspiring to me, and it's not because of his condition. He's inspiring because of his attitude, and he's just a pretty positive kid. So I wanted to do a story with a character like him. Thank you. You're welcome. I pitched Cleft Hood, and I was not there when Craig greenlit the episode, but I do remember my story editor at the time, and I don't think I've told this to Craig. He told me when he pitched for me, he said, you know, Jeremy's got an idea for this show called Cleft Hood, and he explained what it's about. He said that Craig instantly said, I want to do it, just like that. So I thought that was really cool. So I'm very excited, very proud of how it came out.
Yeah, it is truly a really great episode. And Henry, I'd love to jump over to you. You know, Castor really represents so many children who have to miss fun activities or school because of hospital and doctor visits and such. And what message do you hope Castor sends to children and their parents watching?
I really want them to feel like they're not alone, like there are other people who have those same problems as them.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Let's stick with you for a moment. Let's chat a little bit about the Anya stuffy. I loved kind of learning more about the origin of Anya. So Jeremy and Henry, you know, I remember you telling me that this is a toy that you played with when you were young, and I'd love to learn more. And I think our viewers would really love to learn a little bit more about the origin of Anya.
So I will begin. Anya was a big part of our existence. This is the real Anya. My wife had found a doll with a cleft on it. So we got it for our young kiddo. And, you know, I've told this a couple of times. I asked Henry, and I don't remember how old you were, 2 or something. I said, what is this doll's name? And he instantly said Anya. He just knew it was Anya.
Yeah.
So I felt like if we're putting Castor in there, who takes a page out of Henry's book, then Anya should be in there. And to credit to the designers, you know, I had sent them a picture of Henry, and I believe they designed Castor with kind of his essence. And then I sent them a picture of Anya. And if you look, you'll see that the vehicle stuffy that Castor has is very similar to Anya. Do you remember Anya?
Yes, I do.
I wonder how many parents who are watching now are thinking, where can I find that stuffy themselves?
Ask my wife
all those years ago. So Craig, you know, I really love the character of Beth, you know, the therapist, you know, talking about how therapists help people understand their feelings. It's not something that we see a lot on screen and such. And she explains it in such a great way that young children can understand. Can you kind of elaborate on why her role is so important?
Yeah, well, it seems to me that the importance of mental health has not been valued as much as it should be, on screen and off, just in general. So, you know, having a character like Bo's mom, Beth, I think is a fantastic way to introduce the concept of taking care of yourself mentally to a young audience. You know, there's an episode in season 1 where I think, Jeremy, did you write this episode? You did, right?
Yes, about meditating.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, it's about meditating. Beth teaches the Firebuds to take 3 deep breaths in order to calm their bodies down. And she even sings a song about it. And Beth is voiced by Melissa Rauch, who's wonderful. And it's a terrific song. It gets the message across, so much so that when my youngest son, about a year back, saw an early version of the episode, a couple of weeks after, he was taking 3 deep breaths to calm himself down. You know, my wife was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm taking 3 deep breaths." I feel like I should probably remind him of that now. I think that would be very helpful. But it was cool that it stuck with him, even you know, a couple of weeks after seeing the episode. And you know, we're hoping to find other episodes going forward in the show where Beth can, you know, tackle other easy to understand concepts for, you know, taking care of your mind. It really also is nice to have a character in the show as a therapist. So the idea of a therapist becomes familiar and normalized with young kids, because again, there has been a stigma about that in the past, and there's no reason for it. You know, we should be healthy both in our bodies and our mind if we can.
I love that. I mean, I remember learning pre-pandemic, so I have to imagine it's even more now, that anxiety was one of the leading disabilities among the preschool age. And to be thinking about that, we think about it in, you know, kids in high school and young adults, but we don't often think about it in young kids. So I think it's really sending a great message to our children. You mentioned songs, and Jeremy, I really love when we were talking about this song, Put Yourself in Their Wheels, you know, how important it really is to put yourself in other shoes, or in Castor's case, wheels. You know, why are songs so important like this? And, you know, and I love seeing them in the episodes.
Well, songs are fun. Songs are fun to watch. They're fun to listen to. When we write them, I think we're given liberty in songs to be a little bit more abstract, perhaps a little bit more poetic, just a touch. And I think the melody of these songs is helpful in communicating some concepts that might otherwise be harder to convey through just prose dialogue. And in this particular instance, from the moment I pitched the story, I wanted it to be about empathy. I wanted it to be about understanding another's feelings, or at least trying to see things from their point of view. I didn't want it to be just putting a spotlight on the cleft condition. And I think the song is, empathy is a concept that preschool audience has to kind of understand. I think the song does a lovely, beautiful job of conveying that idea.
It'll be fun to see how many of our children will be singing lines from these songs, doing the 3 deep breaths that Craig mentioned, or, other lines from other songs from various episodes. Because, and even years from now, kids remember songs from shows and such. And so I feel really lucky that I had the opportunity to first, communicate with some of you on about this series. I guess 2 years ago, I remember reading through I think the first version that I had a chance to look at was back in March 2021. And so it's nice to be kind of this full circle. And so Craig, can you talk about the value? What I know, you bring in people for all different reasons, to bring people in with like lived disability and other experiences to kind of help ensure that your scripts are going in the right direction.
Sure. Well, when you're trying to portray a character who's diverse authentically, you want to get the little details right. And, there are certain things that a writer can relate to or empathize with when creating a story, and we can do a ton of research. But in order to have a character and their experience really ring true, I think it's important to seek the advice of experts who have lived that experience. And so that's why working with consultants like RespectAbility, and there are others for different occasions, it really helps us all. It helps the writers, it helps the designers, it helps the animators. When we were first doing episodes with Jazzy, our consultant, Tatiana Lee, who had the same medical condition as Jazzy, she told us everything we need to know, including a lot of stuff you couldn't learn in a book. And, right down to how Jazzy's feet should look when she's transitioning between her wheelchair car, Piper, and a regular chair, and it's little things like that make the show so much richer. And it's also a terrific learning experience for all of us on the writing staff. So it really helps everything and everyone. And, at the end of the day, like the kids and adults watching feel like they're being well represented, and it helps authentically portray them to others watching.
Let's stick there for a moment about authentically portraying, because, I remember we also kind of talked about casting then and such. And so, Henry, when we started advertising this event, I got a lot of emails from folks saying, oh, I don't see it anywhere on IMDb or elsewhere. Did they cast the character authentically? Most people expecting the answer to be no, because historically that's what had happened. But I was very excited to respond to them like, yes, it actually character is voiced by a boy who was born with a cleft palate and such. So why is this so important?
I feel like people who have like this clefts can really get into Castor's character more than like a person who had never heard the word cleft before in their life. They probably would just be like, clefts, yeah, that's what I have.
Can I ask a question? Do you talk to
Please do.
your cleft? Did they ask about it?
No, they don't really ask about it.
I've been pretty impressed. His friends seem to just take it in stride. It's
And that's what an episode like this can help do for kids who haven't grown up knowing Henry their whole life, and may meet someone for the first time later in life. After seeing this episode, they might be like, oh, it's nothing unusual. It's just a fact of life that my friend has a cleft and such, and are fully included in everything in school and community and such. So, Craig, what can viewers continue to expect from Firebuds in relation to disability representation?
Well, there's one episode coming up at the beginning of season 2 that we're really excited about. It's called Wrong Way Rescue. And in this episode, we discover that Axel the ambulance, one of our main characters, has dyscalculia, which causes her to mix up the order of numbers. And in this episode, she finds out that she has this condition, but also learns a positive message about managing it while also relying on her other talents to get the job done, or in this case, to get the rescue done. It's a fun episode. It has a great song, another great song. And, I'm really excited about the fact that we are representing someone with a disability through one of our show's main characters. So that's a nice touch. I can't wait for folks to see it.
I love when that happens. I think it's great that we're introduced to characters right away, knowing that they have a disability, and then other times finding out several episodes in because people have grown attachments to the characters. And then they're like, oh, wow, I also have dyscalculia or whatever it might be. And then it's just, like, oh, anything that she can do, I can do too. And it's just a nice way for people to, and I really love how we bring in these kind of non-apparent disabilities that we're getting a chance to kind of see through your series that just aren't as often represented in children's content. So it's great. We are going to be going to some audience questions in a moment. So I want to remind folks that if you'd like to ask a question, please do so. And I'm going to kind of jump to the first one, and it's back to seeing more about Castor. Are we going to see Castor in future episodes? And Michelle in the audience is asking, if Castor does reappear, will he have a scar?
Well, I am not allowed to talk about future episodes, but I can certainly say that Castor does have a scar. It's a little bit harder to see because he's dark purple, but it's there. If you watch it, and there's a couple of ways, he kind of smiles when the light catches it. And it is pretty accurate to the way a post cleft lip surgery scar appears.
Yes.
So Henry, I'm curious, what was it like to work with your dad?
It was really great. I had someone that I could trust and would laugh at all of my really bad jokes.
I think that door swings both ways. When we wrote the episode, I did not think about my son voicing the part. It was obviously inspired by him, but I didn't think in my wildest dreams that we'd come to audition for it. And our story editor at the time said, you should audition your son if you think he's a good actor. And I do think he's a good actor. So we auditioned him and sent it in, and they
Turns out he is a good actor.
Yeah.
Yep. I just from now and our pre-call, I love seeing how you engaged you are with the process. I know that we have some kids in the audience right now, and they might be kind of curious. Can you talk a little bit about what the recording process was like, Henry?
It was very dark, and everyone was nice, and I don't have a very good memory.
Do you remember being nervous? I remember.
Yes, I was very nervous.
Very nervous, and this was I think January 2021, and we went in. There was a dark room, and there was a window. You could see the technicians on the other side, but the creative directors, Craig, and the voice director, Sam Riegel, they were on Zoom.
Yes, I remember that.
And do you remember, how they would ask you to read lines a couple times over?
Yeah, there was a stand, and then they put the lines on the stand, and then I had to stand up and look at the stand to read my lines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they give them adjustments. Can you try reading this line a little bit slower or a little bit happier? That's where some kids can get tripped up, is doing the line in a slightly different way. You did pretty well with it, I thought. Yeah.
Were you in the booth with him, Jeremy?
I was allowed to be in the booth as long as I turned my phone off and remained quiet. So I did.
It's easier now to record because since the pandemic, because most people, we have all our screens off when we're doing the Zoom. So if you're in the booth like Henry was, he can't see our faces. Usually it used to be, and now is again, where you're just sitting on the other side of glass, but it's soundproof. So Henry would say something and then just see a bunch of people talking, but not be able to hear him, which can be very daunting. But luckily, Henry didn't have to deal with that. So I was glad. It was the one benefit of the Zoom was that he didn't have to see a bunch of people talking about his performance, but not know what they're saying. When I've done a couple of characters, and that's the worst part. I feel for the actors.
And then I guess because this was, you did go in during the pandemic, I guess it was very helpful that, you were a family unit in the sense of being in that small room. It was a little less worrisome about having all different people in together.
Yeah, it was a highlight of my career thus far, sitting in that room.
Thank you.
Sure.
So often we see characters with facial differences being made as villains. We see that in a lot of content made for families and older kids and adults, and unfortunately sometimes in young kid content as well, where the facial difference is what makes them the villain. And I really love how Firebuds kind of flips that script. And Jeremy, can you really share more about why this is so important?
Yeah, I really wasn't aware of how often villains have some sort of facial difference. Scar is a very common design trope for villains, some sort of scar tissue. And then, having Henry in my life, you become more aware of these things, and you see how often designers and movie makers and storytellers and showrunners put scars on their bad guys, because it's a kind of quick read. You can gather that this bad guy or villain has had a dark backstory. They had a trauma, and now they're hardened, and they want to watch the world burn or whatever. So I just think that's not the only game in town. I don't want to say that a villain can't have a scar, but I do want to say we should scrutinize those choices, because scars can connote so much more. They can suggest that a person had a life-saving procedure. They could suggest that a person had an experience that made them stronger, or facilitated or empowered their life in a certain way, or it could mean that they're very loved. So facial difference need not belong only to the villainous, and I think it's more brave to show our protagonists, our heroes, with facial difference, and that is just one of the many ways that we can authentically represent the variety of people we have on this planet.
We have another character, a vehicular character with a scar, who a blimp, who started for I think he was like a villain for part of an episode, but very cheerful villain. He was happy to be a henchman. He was a hench blimp, but turns very quickly to be a friend in the episode, and now is a recurring character as one of the Firebuds best friends, and sometimes an honorary Firebud.
That's right.
So that's a really fun character. And we've never explained, he has this kind of, I guess it's a scar, he's a vehicle, so I don't know, a scratch down his windshield, but we've never explained where it came from or why he has it. But it's neat. I think it gives him character, and he's heroic. He's been a hero since the episode he debuted in. So I think that helps.
I think having a mixture of somewhere it's very explained, and we had a big story about, and others where it's unexplained, it's actually a really nice thing, because it allows so many other children who are watching the show to be like, oh, I bet you he got that scar, he got that scratch the same way I did, and all these kids can relate in different ways. And that kind of really leads into this next question from the audience. Craig, how do you hope these stories will be received?
Well, I mean, I hope they're received well. I hope all the stories are received well, just generally. But I think, the hope is that children will either relate and feel represented by what they're seeing on screen, or they'll gain empathy for those that look like what they're seeing on screen or have that experience. One of the big goals of Firebuds as a series is to foster a sense of empathy and community spirit in the kids and adults watching. So, the goal with shows like this is to get away from thinking as someone with a certain condition or from a certain background as something other than yourself and just part of this big human community. So I really hope that the shows are received in that spirit.
Excellent. Okay, this question goes to all of you. Who's your favorite character and what makes that character so unique?
Me.
There's one down. He has chosen himself. Castor's certainly up there for me, and I think if it weren't for my son voicing him, if I had to pick another, I really love Piston. Because he's so similar to me. He loves rules and following the rules and coloring in the lines, and that's very much me.
I think this whole, Castor, this whole conversation is a second place to Castor, obviously.
That's right.
But, like, who's the runner-up? I've lived with these characters now for 4 years, and so there's a lot to love in all of them. It's certainly fun writing Piston, but at the end of the day, I guess I have to go with a character that was inspired by my own son and named after my own son, Bo, because that's what started it all.
Do you want to? I know you've talked about what started it all, at other times, but our viewers might not know. Do you want to elaborate a bit on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm my 7-year-old who 4 years ago was 3. Back then, he was obsessed with fire trucks and used to carry one around and talk to it like it was his best friend. And it got me thinking, how excited would he be if that fire truck came to life and was a kid fire truck? It had the same enthusiasm that he did for going out and helping people, and they could go on adventures together. And, I really it turned into something where I was really excited about making a show about first responders and their families and to bring that element to it. But it started as a bit of a love letter to my son.
Excellent. It's what I feel like when I'm talking to folks in children's content, it almost always is thinking about what it is that our children are going to watch, and how we can help influence that. So Henry, I'm going to jump back to you. If Castor does appear in more episodes, is there anyone you want to guest star opposite you?
I can't remember any actors' names.
That's okay.
Aim high, because we can record this and send it to them and dare them to say no. Just come on, just go for it.
Tom Cruise.
All right, there we go.
All right.
That was good.
So we're going to send that over.
We haven't done a plane character yet, so I'm just saying that could be the
hanging
big
fruit. Tom,
yep.
hope you're listening.
You'll be hearing from us.
I'm sure the comms team will get on it right away.
Do it for Henry.
So I'll start with Jeremy, but then I invite everyone else to kind of answer this question as well, if you'd like. What's been the most memorable part working on the show so far?
Oh, the most memorable part is recording my son. That was not something I ever thought that would be happening. And when I say recording it, I was sitting there quietly watching him, but still, just to hear him bring Castor to life in a way that he kind of is, super enthusiastic and fun loving. That was a real high point for me.
Craig, is there feel free to talk about Henry as well, but is there another moment that you'd like to share that was memorable to you as well?
Well, I mean, that is memorable because it's nice to have, someone who had that experience playing that character, inspired by him, like it's all there, right? Like that's pretty cool. I think one of the, I spend so much time remembering so many little details about the show to get it made that I oftentimes can't remember anything that actually happened while making the show, if that makes sense. Like I remember episode production numbers, but one of the things that was really memorable was when we screened an episode in a theater on a big screen for the families of first responders. It was right after the show came out. It was sort of tied to First Responders Day. And, you know, it was just, that was a moment where you could see everything we were trying to do come together. And you could hear an audience enjoy it around you. And so that was pretty awesome to see that, because it was like after all that hard work, we could be there and see it paying off before our eyes and ears.
If you could be a car, what kind would you be?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. All right. Henry, I want to hear what Henry says first. I have mine.
I think I would be
The Batmobile?
yes, that was what I was thinking.
Batmobile.
Is that allowed?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I presume
Yeah.
if you could be a car, it's allowed to be the Batmobile.
You mean, is that allowed because it's not a Disney character?
Oh, you know. I would be a
Of course it's
2010 Toyota Corolla. That's what I drive.
I'd be a Humvee.
Yeah.
Either a Humvee or the Batmobile.
You know, it's funny you say that, sort of you are what you drive. I was thinking my answer would be like an old VW Bug, which I drove for a little while when I first got out of college. And the car was I think older than me at the time. But you know, they don't have, it's like they just keep plowing through those VW Bugs. They don't look like any other of the cars. They just sort of, and they don't really have all the bells and whistles. That car had no air conditioning. The heater was basically just like a vent from the engine. So like basically it was just like you were drafting off however warm the engine was. And I drove that car over the Rockies in a snowstorm, and it made it. And I was driving by every other car and truck you could imagine stranded in snowbanks off the side of the highway. And it was getting pretty cold because, like I said, it's just as warm as the engine is. That's the heat. So, but you know, it was like the little car that could. So I can relate to that.
We have another audience question, and this one's for Henry. But I imagine that Jeremy may weigh in on it as well. Henry, do you plan to continue voice acting or acting in general?
I think I do. Yeah, that would be fun.
Excellent.
Go.
Well, you'll have to let us know what you do next so we can share it with everyone. Another question, and this can go to all, of how can we show our appreciation to first responders?
Aw. Well, I'll tell you what we do. My wife buys donuts and brings them to the fire station, which I'm hopeful is just her showing appreciation for first responders, and not because they are particular quality of handsomeness, but I think they're a great bunch. We've gone by to the fire station a number of times. They're always friendly, always happy to give us tours. That's how we do it. Other than making the show, which I think is not only a love letter to Craig's inspiration there, but a love letter to first responders and their contribution.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things we've been trying to do. But in addition to that, you know, there are a number of charitable causes, both for first responders, but also charitable causes that you know, you'll see fire stations or police departments sort of organize for other folks. So, you know, I kind of like supporting what the first responders are supporting, you know, so I think that's one easy way, because it's easy to find either the sort of charitable organizations for them or by them. They're all around.
The other thing is to simply say thank you as well.
There is that too.
But
you know, go to the station when things are quiet. Don't try to flag folks down when they're driving down the road.
Or when you see people, you know, just out and about in their uniforms, not working, you know, not in the middle of doing some life-saving, but you know, saying thank you.
I think thank you goes a long way with just about everybody. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean that. I mean that to elevate it. It's a good. It's a nice. Doesn't cost you anything, and it's a lovely thing to hear.
Another question for Henry. How did your friends react knowing that you're going to be on TV?
I haven't told most of them, but the friends that I did tell, they were like, "Oh man, that's pretty cool."
Yeah. Henry's been very good about, because he knew, because I told him he wasn't allowed to talk about it for a while. This is a big thing to sit on top of. So he only recently has he understood that he's allowed to tell kids about it.
Are you going to have a viewing party on Friday?
That's a good question.
I want a party.
You want a party? Okay, I guess we got it.
Apologies that I just put that on your plate. So we have another question in the audience from Jennifer Goga about RespectAbility's role in consulting on Firebuds. I can speak to it, but Craig, I know you could also speak to it.
Yeah, I mean, you're more than welcome to answer it. You know it as well as I do.
Sure. So one thing that I thought that this team did really, really well was really working with us kind of throughout the process. So it wasn't just a one time, let's kind of check the box. All right, we talked to someone from the community and now we can kind of do our own thing. But it was a back and forth, with different versions of the script to make sure the language was correct. And then it was also then working with the animators. And as Craig has mentioned, there are many different disabled characters that we're going to get to meet. And so a lot of these needed considerations when animating them and ensuring that animation was done correctly. And so I think one area that I really enjoyed working in was how we provided reference videos for the animators and such. We brought up Jazzy before, the fact that she doesn't always stay in her wheelchair vehicle. She sometimes sitting and she transfers. And what does it mean to transfer from one location to another? Because I think some people might incorrectly assume that someone who uses a wheelchair is either always in a wheelchair or potentially a bed. But no, many people use a wheelchair, do move around to other places to sit and such. So I really loved how we were able to kind of work with the animators. And then as the show came up, then we started working with the communications team. How do we market things and promote and such, and share with different members of the community as well.
And there, if I could just add on to that, there are multiple check-in points, as you mentioned, like at our outline stage, when the story is first kind of being developed, at the script stage, and again at the animatic stage as we're starting to animate. So that's, with multiple check-in points, we create a good working relationship where the feedback can be a little more ongoing and inform some of the things that we do in a greater way.
Yes, I love those multiple check-ins. I think that's super important, because something could appear fine in a written form, but then we all of a sudden see it in the animatic and we bring up concerns and such. So it's great. It really helps avoid any misrepresentation. With that, we're going to move on to our last question. So we're going to ask everyone to respond to this. What do you want kids and families to take away from this episode?
Well, one of the things that I want them to take away is the theme of the episode, which is to exercise your empathy muscle. Try to think about how others are looking at the world. When I pitched the episode, the idea of empathy was baked into the idea. And Henry has certainly helped me exercise that muscle. He has never dodged out of a surgery to go to a carnival, but he has, I think it's fair to say, not looked forward to some of your surgeries. So it's important for us to try to, if we can, think about how others are experiencing the world and do our best to act accordingly.
One of the things I really like about the song, I think there's a lyric in there, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's, it talks about how, someone might be going through something you don't know. And I think that's what I really like about this episode, not in the sense of being empathetic, but also in the sense of knowing that, this character, like the character of Castor, is going through this thing that's not your experience, but it's it's very important to them, and to give some thought to that. And so then to apply that to people, that may be dealing with something medical, but also to people dealing with something else. And I really like that part of the message, just to be mindful of that in your life, that whenever you see someone and whatever their behavior may be, they may be going, you may see someone, they may be super rude, and they may be having something in their life, they may be having the worst day in their life, and so it's just a good thing to keep in mind as you go through the world, both with things that are obvious, like in the case of Castor, and things that aren't so on the surface.
Henry, anything else you wanted to share?
Well, this might be the first time a few people, or like little kids, have ever heard the word empathy, and this is a pretty good chance for them to learn it, and maybe even learn a bit more about clefts.
That's one of the wonderful things about writing for this audience. You get the idea that some of the things you're talking about may very well be the first time they're hearing anything about these. So it's a big privilege to be able to kind of introduce a lot of people to some of these things. Well said.
Thank you.
So if you want to watch this again, the Cleft Hood episode premieres this Friday, March 10th on both Disney Channel and Disney Junior, and then will be available to stream on Disney Plus starting Wednesday, March 15th. So I really want to thank Jeremy, Henry, and Craig. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you. As I've shared with you before, this is a series that I really enjoy. And, as my daughter gets a little older, I'm like, I have to find other little kids to introduce this to. But we're just really excited to be seeing this upward trend of authentic representation. And thanks again to the folks at Disney Branded TV for this wonderful series.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. And thanks everybody for showing up.
Yeah, honored.